Beijing said to have an open attitude towards meeting with pan-democratic legislators. The government repossesses 2 Tunmoon industrial units where land lease conditions are violated. And Greece inches closer to default as Eurozone talks break down.
Good evening. The Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs says the central government has a, quote, open attitude about holding a meeting with pan-democratic legislators on political reform. However, nothing concrete has been worked out yet. Evelina Leung reports.
Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Raymond Tam today attended a Tsuen Wan District Council meeting. He said he is working on the Pan-Democrats' request for a meeting with central government officials to discuss political reform. Tam said he had relayed the message to Beijing authorities during a recent visit to the capital city. Mainland officials, he said, have an open attitude towards the request. Tam added that if both sides continue to keep an open attitude about this, a meeting shouldn't be hard to arrange. However, because of the Spring Festival holiday and the upcoming annual sessions of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the National People's Congress, it will be hard to arrange a meeting anytime soon. Lawmakers welcomed Tam's announcement.
The Democratic Party is always willing to engage in dialogue with the Hong Kong and with the central government officials.
Now the situation is quite polarized, and that really worries me. And so I personally do welcome any kind of meeting or a chat or communications with officials, be they Beijing officials or government officials.
We are worried that actually a lot of situation in Hong Kong was being distorted by the pro-establishment camp and by the Hong Kong government. So there's a need for direct dialogue to represent the true picture, the true feeling of the people of Hong Kong for true democracy.
Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam, meanwhile, attended a Yuen Long District Council meeting on political reform. She was met with some councillors who oppose Beijing's political reform framework. Some councillors complained about the lack of representativeness of the proposed nominating committee. However, some pro-establishment councillors compared the pan-democrats to children who are throwing a tantrum. They say the government shouldn't give in to them. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
Another 18 people have died from influenza, with the death toll rising to 228 people so far this year. The government plans to bring in new vaccines against the H3N2 flu virus, but there won't be enough for everyone. As Owen Fung reports, a committee of medical experts suggests that the elderly and patients with chronic illnesses should have priority.
The government plans to buy more new vaccines that will provide more effective protection against the H3N2 influenza virus. It's estimated that the first batch will consist of 100,000 doses.
For the number of Southern Hemisphere influenza vaccine that we can secure in the next several months, the number will not be sufficient for everyone in Hong Kong.
Following a meeting today, a Centre for Health Protection Committee recommends the elderly and those with chronic illnesses should be the first group to be given the new vaccine.
For those over 85, right, the number of admission and also the number of mortality is highest. So that's why probably we'll start with the over 85.
Chow added that the new vaccine should not cause too much side effect for those who were vaccinated recently. The committee also said not all medical practitioners need to receive the new vaccine, but those working in emergency wards and homes for the elderly should consider whether to receive the new vaccine. Owen Fung, TVB News.
The Lands Department has repossessed 2 units at an industrial building in Tuen Mun. This comes after several tenants were found conducting retail and wholesale activities in violation of their lease conditions. Liz Yoon reports.
Without knowing it was operating illegally, this Shenzhen visitor said he had visited the store at Maikei Industrial Building twice before. He wanted to buy some chocolate and daily necessities. To his disappointment, the store was closed today. The store has been shut since Friday. Noting that some individuals are running business activities which are in breach of the lease conditions in the building, the Lands Department issued warning letters twice to the property owners, ordering them to stop. This lady has been running her maternal care business in 2 units in this building. She said a lot of tenants like her are carrying out retail and wholesale activities, and she didn't know that such acts are in breach of the lease terms. She stressed that unlike some other shop operators, she's not a parallel goods trader. She added the building is very congested on the weekends. Later in the day, staff removed promotional banners at the building. The Lands Department expressed concern that industrial buildings in the new territories have been converted into retail spots. It promised stricter law enforcement to combat any parallel trading activities. Tuen Mun Rural Committee Chairman Junius Ho said the government went to the land registry to begin repossession of the units. Property owners may apply for a concession and repossess the property within 6 months after the units come under the government's ownership. Les Yun, TVB News.
The possibility of a Greek default on its debt looms larger after a breakdown in talks among the Eurozone's 19 finance ministers. Greece is refusing to accept a key condition on the extension of its bailout program. Ellen Buknia reports.
Without some sort of financing arrangements in place after the current bailout ends February 28th, Greece would face real difficulty meeting debt repayments. Bankruptcy and an exit from the Eurozone would loom. But a meeting on how to make Greece's debt sustainable broke down in acrimony after just 3 hours. Eurozone creditors are proposing a 4 to 6 month extension on loan payments under existing conditions.
We simply need more time, and the best way for that is to, at this point, extend the current program, which would then allow us a number of months to work on future arrangements.
But Athens wants to scrap the existing bailout package altogether and instead agree to a bridging program to support its finances. Greece's new government blames the current bailout for inflicting budget austerity that's plunged the country into painful recession. The left-wing Syriza party won the election 3 weeks ago on a promise to get rid of it.
Europe is going through a difficult process of adjusting to the fact that there is a government now in Greece which is challenging a program that has been going for 5 years, which has failed quite clearly in the minds of all people who don't have a vested interest in pretending that it hasn't failed. And our difficulty is to convince our partners that Europe must cut its losses with a program that is not working.
The uncertainty continues to run roughshod on the Greek stock market, which dropped 3.8% Monday. The euro also continues to slip. The European Central Bank will decide Wednesday on whether to maintain emergency lending to Greek banks. How long the country can stay afloat without it is uncertain, but Varoufakis expressed confidence a solution can be found. Athens' stance continues to be popular in Greece, where hundreds gathered outside the Parliament building in a show of support. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
Egypt is calling for a United Nations resolution mandating an international coalition to intervene in Libya after its jets bombed Islamic State targets there. The airstrikes came a day after Islamic State released an online video showing the beheadings of a captive group of Egyptian Coptic Christian men. James Aiken reports.
Egyptian state television aired footage of the moment fighter jets unleashed retribution for the killings of Egyptians captured by Islamic State. Libya's Air Force also took part in the attacks, which targeted an East Coast city considered a base for Islamic State fighters. On the ground, amateur video shows smoke from the explosions filling the skyline. Libya is where the Islamic State has built up its strongest foothold outside Syria and Iraq. Despite protests from Libya's rival Tripoli-based parliament, the Egyptian government is now lobbying Europe and the United States for a coordinated international response to the militants in Libya, similar to the coalition air campaign in Syria and Iraq. The idea of intervention is gaining traction in Italy, whose southern tip is less than 800 kilometers from the Libyan coast. With political support for military involvement growing, Italian officials say Rome must be ready to participate in any military intervention to keep Islamic State from gaining more ground in Libya. At the Vatican, Pope Francis condemned the executions. The pontiff said the hostages were killed simply because they were Christians. In a small village outside of Cairo, families of 13 of the executed men gathered for a funeral. One family member asked what the victims did to deserve death. They can only be called dogs, she said of the killers. With the killings and the subsequent airstrikes drawing Egypt into the Libyan crisis, protesters in Cairo expressed their outrage. The victims were among thousands of unemployed Egyptians desperately seeking work in Libya despite the risks. While some demanded vengeance and protection from their military, others asked why their government didn't strike Islamic State targets much earlier when they had the chance. James Aiken, TVB News.
Thousands of people gathered at memorials around Denmark to commemorate those who fell victim to the country's worst terror spree in 3 decades. More details are emerging about the gunman whose shooting rampage killed 2 people in Copenhagen.
Denmark's Prime Minister, Crown Prince, and foreign dignitaries joined the 30,000 people who came to honor the victims.
We have received expressions of sympathy and support from leaders and people around the world. It has warmed my heart and all Danes deeply.
Earlier in the day, the Prime Minister made clear terrorists will not intimidate her country.
And we will not accept any attempt to threaten or intimidate our liberties and our rights.
The latest claim about the gunman is right before the attacks, Omar Abdel Hamid El Hussein pledged allegiance to ISIS. This journalist wasn't surprised, saying El Hussein was arrested 15 months ago for almost stabbing to death a random train passenger.
A kid, a 19-year-old kid who was sitting with his telephone playing a game or something. And then out of nowhere from behind he is attacked by Omar with a big knife who starts stabbing him.
El Hussein is also linked to a criminal gang in Copenhagen. This is video of him as a kickboxer in his younger years. While authorities scrutinize possible links to jihadi terror groups, a judge has jailed 2 of El Hussein's friends for 10 days.
And we were so scared.
They allegedly helped him to get rid of a gun. At a memorial outside the synagogue where a Jewish security guard was gunned down, his family was moved by the outpour of support.
They were extremely shocked to see how many people came. You know, the flowers, and it really overwhelmed them.
The Jewish community refuses to let ISIS scare tactics alter their way of life.
We shall not. We shall live the life we think is the right life.
Like most Danes, they honor the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
And still ahead in our newscast, a preview of Chinese New Year night parade attractions. In East Timor, an opposition politician is sworn in as the Prime Minister. And the Vatican offers homeless people a free shave and haircut.
How do you find a mate if your means of survival is to camouflage yourself with your surroundings? Learn the answers to this and other interesting questions. from the animal class that arguably rules our world. Tonight Little Matters. Insects. At 9:30 on Pearl Spectacular.